Hi budding engineers, welcome to Section Engineering Lectures and welcome to a new playlist on the design of the steel structures as per the limited method IS 800-2007. In today's class we shall see the introduction of flexural members, beams, laterally supported beams and laterally unsupported beams, the codal provisions as well as the design strength in bending. Right? In the previous class we have seen the design of gazetted bases, design of column bases with bolted connections like this, a few solved problems, as well as the design of column bases and gazetted bases with welded connections, a few solved problems like this. I hope you enjoyed the discussions there. Then you click like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let's see the brief profile of the speaker. That is I, Dr. D. Rupesh Kumar, obtained my BTech in Civil Engineering from Nagarjuna University in 1994, MTech Section Engineering from JNTU Hyderabad in 2000, and PhD Section Engineering from JNTU Hyderabad in 2009. Presently, I am working as Professor of Department of Civil Engineering, University College of Engineering, Osman University, Hyderabad, Telangana State. I have an experience of 27 years, of which 7 years is in industry and 20 years is in teaching and research at graduate and postgraduate levels. My research areas include reinforced cement concrete design, steel structural design, structural analysis, battlement analysis, earthquake engineering, bridge engineering, structural optimization. I published 45 research papers in international as well as national journals and conferences, organized 3 international conferences and 11 national conferences and workshops, attended 43 workshops, visited 2 countries, delivered 13 guest lectures and edited 3 books, supervising 14 PhD scholars and supervised 30 MA theses. I am actively involved in various consultancy works that are offered by the department and completed over 750 design proof checks and 150 designs of RCC, steel, composite, low-rise, high-rise, multi-story buildings and road as well as rail bridges. Now let us see the designs of the beams. Right now, before we see, let us see the different schematics. Student, right? We'll be examining the different schematics like this, right? This is how what now I'm showing is a photograph of a building wherein it consists of both laterally supported as well as laterally unsupported beams. Right now, if I examine this longitudinal beam, which is supported by the secondary beams, is what called laterally supported beam, whereas these cross girders or these cross beams are laterally unsupported because there is no support as of now. Right? That is how these are the laterally supported and laterally unsupported beams, right? Wherein, let me also show, right? These are the beams with lateral support. However, the lateral support can be ensured by providing a restraint to the compression plane. For buckling, that will see, right? This is a laterally supported beam, student, right? Whereas this is a laterally unsupported beam, right? Even I'm showing this this beam is a laterally unsupported beam, right? Now this is the these are the laterally supported and unsupported beams. Once we examine this laterally supported and unsupported beam, let us move quickly to the discussions. Right? Once we see these, now let us move quickly to the top, the designs of the laterally supported beams, right? Designs of the laterally supported beams as per this class IS 800-2007, class 8.2, page number 52, right? Then we'll also move to the top, the laterally unsupported beams also at a quicker pace, right? Now let me see these at a quicker pace, student, right? Therefore, and then in page number 52 or 52, yes, right? This is design of member subjected to bending, right? Whereas the member subjected to predominant bending shall have adequate strength, design strength, strength to resist the bending moment, shear force and concentrated forces imposed upon it, and these shall satisfy the deflection limits also. However, if the member is subjected to other forces in addition to the bending or biaxial bending, then they shall be designed according to the section 9 that we will see, right? Even that section 9 also will see according to that specification 9, right? Section 9, right? Now once we see that the next subheading is the effective span of the beams. It shall be generally taken as the distance between the center to center of the supports, right? And next heading is the design strength of bending or in flexure, right? The design strength of the beam adequately supported against lateral torsional buckling, laterally supported beams, right? Lateral torsional buckling. Just now shown in this schematic, that this is subjected to lateral torsional buckling, right? This one, right? Lateral torsional buckling, right? Bending is this as well as the buckling is also bending is there in the lateral direction as well as the torsion is also there. Please make a note, right? But for such a case, if it is adequately supported against such lateral torsional buckling, then this is what called laterally supported beams is then governed by the yield stress only. However, if the beam is not not adequately supported against lateral buckling, means if it is laterally unsupported beam, then the design bending strength may be governed by the lateral torsional buckling. Means if it is laterally unsupported beam, then the designs are governed by lateral torsional buckling. However, if it is laterally supported beam, then the design strength is just governed by the yield stress. Just make note of this, right? And the factor design moment M should be less than or equal to MD, where MD is the design bending strength of the section, which need to be calculated as per the class 8.2.1.2, right? Now let us see this first heading as laterally supported beams, students, right? How to design these laterally supported beams, right? Design the laterally supported beams. What are the codal specifications, right? Just now we have seen that M should be less than or equal to MD, where MD is the design bending moment and M is the moment of resistance, right? Now let us see this. A beam may be assumed to be laterally supported adequately at the support, provided the compression flange has a full lateral restraint and nominal torsional restraint at the supports supplied by web cleats, partial depth end plates that already told fin plates are continuity with the adjacent spans, right? Full lateral restraint to the compression flange may be assumed to exist if the frictional or the other positive restraints of a floor connection to the compression flange of the member is capable of resisting a lateral force not less than 2.5% of the maximum force in the compression flange of the member, right? However, this may be considered to be uniformly distributed along the plane, right? Now, next, the design bending strength of a section which is not susceptible to web buckling under the shear force before yielding means when this D, depth to thickness of this web, is less than or equal to 67 times epsilon, then obviously shall be determined according to class 8.2.1.2. means if D by T is less than or equal to 67 times epsilon, then web buckling will not occur under the shear, right? Now next heading is next specification is sections with webs susceptible to shear buckling before yielding, right? When the flanges are plastic, compact or semi-compact, but the web is susceptible to shear buckling before yielding, means if D by T is less than 67 epsilon, the design bending strength shall be calculated using one of these following methods. First one, the bending moment and the axial force acting on the section may be assumed to be resisted by the flanges only, right? Obviously, right? The bending moment will be purely taken by the flanges, always by the flanges only, right? And the web will be resisting only the shear. Actually, there is assumption in the design of the beams, right? That the flanges will be taking the bending moment and the web will be taking the shear. Then there is also the prime assumption. And the other one is the bending moment and axial force acting on the section may be assumed to be resisted by the whole section. In such case, the web shall be designed for combined shear and normal stresses using simple elastic theory in case semi-compact webs and simple plastic theory in case of compact or plastic webs. Now, code says that if at all even the bending as well as axial forces are acting on the entire section, then the entire section need to be the web shall be designed for combined shear as well as the normal stresses, right? That is what the codal specification, right? Now once we see this, let us see the other codal specification, student, right? when the factor design shear force does not exceed 0.6 VD, where VD is the design shear strength of the cross section, then the design bending strength MD shall be taken as MD is equal to beta B multiplied by ZP Fy divided by gamma M naught, right? This is the design bending strength formula if it is low shear, right? Low shear means if the factor design shear force is less than 0.6 VD, right? VD is the design shear strength of the cross section, right? However, to avoid the irreversible deformation under the serviceability loads, MD shall be less than 1.2 Fi Ze divided by gamma M naught in case of the simply supported beams, and 1.5 Ze Fi divided by gamma M naught for cantilevered beams. This even we have seen in the previous class also, where beta B is equal to 1 for plastic and compact sections, and beta B is defined as the ratio of the elastic section to plastic section for semi-compact sections, right? And where Zp and Ze are the plastic and elastic section moduli of the cross section respectively, and Fi is the yield stress of the material, and gamma M naught is the partial safety factor. However, if the design shear force factored design shear force exceeds 0.6 VD, then the design bending strength MD shall be taken as MD is equal to MdV. However, what is MdV? Now let us see. However, as defined in class 9.2. Now let me go to that page number. That 9.2, class 9.2 student, right? Let me go to that 9.2. Just bear for a moment, right? I'll come to that. Yes, not this one. Not this one. 9.2. Yes, student, right? This is now yes. This is the 9.2, right? 9.2, right? What the code says is that the combined shear and bending, no reduction in movement capacity of the section is necessary, right? These are the movement members subjected to combined forces, right? The combined shear and bending, right? Now let me see this, right? For then in such a case, this MdV means the shear is what called, if the applied shear force is less than 0.6 times the design shear strength, that is what called the low shear. If it is more than 60%, then MD is equal to MdV. That MdV for the plastic and compact sections is given by MD minus beta multiplied by MD minus MFD. However, this should be less than or equal to 1.2 Ze Fi divided by gamma M naught, where beta is equal to 2V divided by Vd minus 1 whole square. MD is the plastic design moment of the whole section, disregarding the high shear force effect, right? Considering the web buckling effects as per the class 8.2.1.1 and 8.2.1.2, and Vd is the design shear strength, V is the factor applied shear force as governed by the web yielding or web buckling, right? MFD is the plastic design strength of the area of the cross section excluding the shear area. Please make a note. Considering the partial safety factor, and Ze is the elastic section modulus. However, this MdV for the plastic section we have seen. However, for semi-compact section, that is for the plastic or compact section, that formula, whereas for semi-compact section MdV is equal to Ze Fi divided by gamma M naught, right? That is how the formula, student, right? Once I examine that, now let me go to further discussions on the design of laterally supported beams. Let me go, revisit to page number 52. Page number 52, right? 52, yes. Just now we have seen this, right? Wherein MdV, right? Code says that it should be given by the MD shall be taken as MdV. Just now we have seen how the MdV shall be taken as per this class 9.2, right? Now next submitting is the holes in the tension zone. If at all the holes are there like this, right, in the tension zone, obviously just making for connections of the bolted connections like this, right, the bolted connection, then the effect of the holes in the tension zone on the design bending strength need not be considered if ANF by AGF is greater than or equal to Fi divided by Fu multiplied by gamma M1 divided by gamma m naught divided by 0.9, where ANF by AGF is a ratio of the net to gross area of the flange in tension, and Fi by Fu is a ratio of the yield to ultimate stresses of the material, and gamma m1 and gamma m naught are the ratio of the partial safety factors against the ultimate stress as well as the yield stress respectively. However, when the ANF by AGF ratio does not satisfy the above requirement, the reduced effective flange area AEF satisfying the above equation may be taken as the effective flange area in the tension instead of AGF. Please make a note, right? And the effect of the holes in the tension region of the web on the tension flexural strength need not be considered if the limit given in A above is satisfied for the complete tension zone of the cross section comprising the tension flange and tension region of the web, right? And the fastener holes in the compression zone of the cross section need not be considered, right? If all this is the compression zone, this fastener holes, right, need not be considered in the design bending strength calculation except for oversized or slotted holes or holes without any fastener. Let us say I am not providing any fastener there, therefore it is just without any fastener means you deduct that area. However, generally if you provide a fastener, a bolt, then obviously it will cover that whole area, hence no deduction need to be done. That is about the holes in the tension as well as compression zone. Now next subheading is the shear lag effect, right? What is the shear lag effect? Is like this, right? The shear lag, let me show this schematically illustrated. What is a shear lag, right? Let me go back, not this, right? Not this schematic, yes, right? Therefore, I am taking that I section, right? I section where it is the web, right? At the intersection of the flange with that of the web, right? There is the shear, horizontal shear in addition to the vertical shear. Actually, this is a vertical shear, but there is an equal and opposite complementary shear. Therefore, this is the complementary shear, right? Because of this, obviously, right, that shear will also be resisted by this intersection of the flange with the web. But at that intersection of the flange with the web, at that intersection, we can see that there is a large stress when compared to that of the smaller stresses at the free ends of the flange. Means there is a non-uniform distribution. There is a non-uniform distribution of the stresses across the flange web. So across the flange. There is a non-uniform distribution, right? Therefore, this is due to the shear lag. Means here the shear is lagging because of this unsupported nature, or because of this unstiffened part. It will take less shear stress, whereas this intersection is almost presumed to be stiffened part, therefore it will take more shear. Therefore this effect is what called the shear lag effect. Even the same can also be seen in the tension zone. Also there is, right, large shear is taken at the intersection of the flange with the web, whereas as I move to the toe of the flange, obviously the shear stress is reducing, or the stress in the flange is reducing. Therefore, it is a non-uniform distribution of the stress in the flange, which is due to the shear lag effect, right? Shear lag effect. Or even I am showing the same shear lag effect when an angle is connected to the top of a plate like this, right? Wherein therefore these free at the free end, right, there is a less stress as compared to the top, the ends which are connected with the plate. Therefore, there is a heavy stress, right? Even there is a heavy stress at the intersection of this, right? Whereas this is free, which is prone to buckle, right, under compression. Therefore, less stress. This is what called the shear lag effect. In the case of an angle section. Even I have shown an I section also, right? Once such shear lag effect is there, then how or when it shall be considered. Right? The shear lag effect in the flanges may be disregarded. For outstand element, supported along one edge, if at all B naught by L naught is B naught is less than or equal to L naught by 20, and for internal elements supported along two edges, BI is less than L naught by 10, right? Where L naught is the length between the points of the zero moment or points of inflections or contraflexes of the beam, and B naught is the width of the flange with outstand, and BI is the width of the flange as an internal element, Therefore, in such case, shear lag effect may be neglected. Otherwise, if these are not satisfied, then shear lag effect must be considered, right? Now, these are the codal specifications of the laterally supported beams, student, right? So far, what we have been seeing is the codal specifications of the laterally supported beams, right? However, once we do that design for the bending, obviously, even we need to check whether the web buckling, and web crippling will lead to the failure of the member or not, right? Therefore, let us see what is this web buckling, right? Therefore, once the load is transferred onto the web from the flange, obviously the web which is acting as if a column will try to buckle. You just see, I am showing this, right? Therefore, once the load is applied, now because the web is very thin element, obviously it is buckling in the lateral direction. Therefore, this is what called the web buckling. It is akin to that of a column which is with some end conditions, right? Either it may be fixed conditions, right? Like this, right? This I section, which is these flanges will be acting as if the supports, right? However, this web will be buckling between these flanges. Therefore, this is in the lateral direction. This is what called the web buckling. Once it is subjected to the external loading, right? Which is accompanied by the translation in the downward direction, as well as translation in the lateral direction, as well as the rotation, like this. All the three will be happening, right, for the web buckling. Whereas for the what is web crippling? Web crippling means, however, once if heavy load is being transferred in the form of a concentrated load, right, at intermediate location, obviously, right, at the intersection of the flange with the web, immediately a kink will form like this. Unable to bear that load. Now the bearing area of this web at the intersection of the flange with the web is less, therefore is unable to bear that load. The web is crippling, right? Therefore, this is what called the web crippling failure. However, similarly, at the supports, obviously the load will be transferred from bottom, obviously, right? Therefore, at the bottom flange, a kink may form at the intersection of the flange with the web. A kink may form like this, right? Therefore, this is what called the web crippling at the support, and this is what called web crippling at the intermediate at the applied loads at intermediate locations. Wherever the load is applied, a web crippling will form like this, right? That these are at the bottom, right, at the reaction, as well as this is at the load position, right? However, this web buckling is will not be taken place when d by tw is less than or equal to 67 times epsilon. Just now we have already seen in the codal specification, right? However, just now we have seen this, that if what are the other these specifications already seen that if Vd is not greater than V is not greater than 0.6 Vd, Md is given by this formula, and if V is greater than 0.6 is not greater than 0.6 Vd, Md is equal to beta b Fi divided by gamma m naught multiplied by Zp. However, this beta b is 1 multiplied by the ratio of Ze by Zp. However, if this V is greater than 0.6 Vd, then Md is equal to Mdv. Just now we have examined that Mdv is equal to Md minus beta multiplied by Md minus Mfd, which should be less than or equal to 1.2 Ze Fi divided by gamma m naught, where beta is equal to 2V divided by Vd minus 1 whole square. However, this is for the compact section, whereas for the semi-compact section, this is Ze multiplied by Fi divided by gamma m naught, right? These holes in the tension zone also we have examined, right? And shear lag effect also we have seen, and we already know what is buckling, right? However, what is warping, right? Now, what is warping means, right? However, the due to the torsion, obviously the flanges, right? Obviously, because this is under torsion, right? The flanges will be subjected to deformations, right? Like this, right? Therefore, which is referred to as the warping of that compression flange or that of the tension flange, warping, right? Therefore, however, it is accompanied by the deflection is accompanied by a continuous curvature in either of the compression as well as tension zone, right? Warping, right? And however, this is how they are warped sections, right? In the compression as well as tension zones, right? However, now code says that when web is subjected to the shear, resist the shear forces, the flanges are subjected to bending moment, right? Because of this, the section will warp like this. Because of the combined action of this web is subjected to shear as well as the flanges subjected to bending movements, the entire section means the flanges will be subjected to warping, right? Now, however, as it is not uniform distribution, the shear lag effect need to be accounted. We already discussed what is the shear lag effect and when it need not be considered. That also we have seen that for outstanding elements, if B0 is equal to less than or equal to L0 by 20. For internal elements, if B1 is less than or equal to L0 by 10, then it need not be considered. Right? This is for internal element. This is for outstanding element. This is what called internal element, right, student? Right? Now, once we examine that, now let us see also the codal specifications for the design of laterally unsupported beams, right? Design of laterally unsupported beams, right? Now, let us examine what is a lateral unsupported beam, student. Right? Therefore, now if I see this beam, which is not at all provided by means of any connection in the compression zone, is what called laterally unsupported beam. Whereas if I see this main beam, all these secondary beams are connected in the compression zone. Therefore, this main beam is what called laterally supported beam. Though there is no slab provided, there is no decking provided, then also this is called this main beam between these two columns is what called laterally supported. Whereas this secondary beam, if it is not provided by means of any decking by appropriate shear stud, then this is what referred to as a laterally unsupported beam, student, right? Like this, right? Then how to design these laterally unsupported beams, right? Now that we'll examine, right? What are these codal specifications? Let us see at a quicker pace as per IS 800. Now we are in class 8.2.2 laterally unsupported beam. Resistance to lateral torsional buckling need not be checked separately, right? In the following cases, bending about the minor axis of the section, right? Bending is about the minor axis of the section, right? Then you need not check for the lateral torsional buckling, need not be checked, right? The second one, section is hollow, rectangular, or tubular, or solid bars, right? And in case major axis bending, then lambda LT is less than 0.4. Lambda LT is less than 0.4. Then this lateral torsional buckling check need not be done. However, the design bending strength of laterally unsupported beams is governed by the lateral torsional buckling given by this formula, MD is equal to beta B ZP FBD, where beta B is equal to 1 for plastic and compact section, and is equal to ZE divided by ZP for semi-compact section, where ZP and ZE are the plastic section modulus and elastic section modulus with respect to the extreme compression fiber, and FBD is the design bending compressive stress obtained as given below, right, where FBD is given by Roman XLT multiplied by Fi divided by gamma m naught, where XLT is a bending stress reduction factor to account for lateral torsional buckling. Given by this, XLT is equal to 1 divided by pi LT plus square root of pi LT square minus lambda LT square. However, this reduction factor should be less than or equal to 1, where pi LT is equal to 0.5 multiplied by 1 plus alpha LT multiplied by lambda LT minus 0.2 plus lambda LT whole square, where alpha LT is a imperfection parameter or imperfection factor, right, and it is equal to 0.21 for the rolled steel sections and is equal to 0.49 for welded steel sections. And the non-dimensional slenderness ratio, lambda LT. What is lambda LT is? Lambda is the slenderness ratio, but LT means non-dimensional slenderness ratio. Lambda LT is given by this is equal to square root of beta B ZP Fi divided by MCR. However, this should be less than or equal to square root of 1.2 ZE Fi divided by MCR, or it should be equal to square root of Fi divided by FCRB, where MCR is the elastic critical moment calculated according to class 8.2.2.1, and the next one is FCRB is the extreme fiber bending compressive stress. Extreme fiber bending compressive stress corresponding to elastic lateral buckling movement, right? However, what is that? 8.2.1 elastic lateral torsional buckling movement, right? In case simply supported prismatic members with symmetric cross section, the elastic lateral buckling movement MCR is given by this. MCR is equal to square root of this square root of pi square multiplied by EI by LLT whole square, that whole multiplied by G I IT plus pi square EIW divided by LLT whole square, or that is equal to beta B multiplied by ZP FCRB, where FCRB is a non-slender FCRB of the non-slender rolled steel section in the above equation is given in the table 14, which is calculated using this formula, or FCRB. That table 14 is calculated based upon this formula stated, where FCRB is equal to 1.1 pi square E divided by LLT divided by RY whole square multiplied by 1 plus 1 by 20 LLT divided by RY divided by HF divided by TF whole square under root. This is under root, right? Therefore, let us see that table 14, right? This is how that table 14. Let me go revisit that table 14. Student, just wait for a moment. Yes, this is the table 14, right? This is the table 14, what we are referring, right? This is the critical stress FCRB where for a different slenderness ratio Ki by R starting from 10 to a maximum value of say 300 for different H by TF varying from 8 to a maximum value of 100. Therefore, if you know this H by TF and if you know what is the slenderness ratio, then you can find out what is the critical stress FCRB, right? FCRB, right? Now, once I examine this, right? Now let us see the next one. Next one is, right? However, the following simplified equation may be used in case of prismatic members made of standard rolled I section and welded doubly symmetric I sections for calculating the elastic lateral buckling moment. MCR is equal to pi square EIY HF divided by 2 LLT whole square multiplied by 1 plus 1 by 20 LLT divided by RY whole square divided by HF divided by TF whole square, that under root, right? Where IT is a torsional constant which is given the summation of BI cube divided by 3 for open sections, and IW is a warping constant. Just now we discussed what is warping, right? Therefore, there is warping constant, and IY RY is equal to moment of inertia of radius of variation respectively. About the weaker section, Y means weaker section, and LLT is effective length for lateral torsional buckling, and HF is the center to center distance between the flanges, right? And TF is the thickness of the flange, Now, next heading, right, is the effective length. Now, before I see this, let me also see what is this FBD student, right? The code says that FBD is the design bending compressive stress obtained as given by this formula XLT Fy divided by gamma m naught. However, alternatively, these tables 13a and 13b will also give FBD. Let us see this FBD table, right? 13a, design bending compressive stress corresponding to lateral buckling, FBD, with alpha LT is equal to 0.21, right? For rolled steel sections, right? For FCRB 10,000 to so on and so forth up to a value of 10 for different FI values, right? Therefore, if I have this FI value 250, now I already know what is FCRB. Let us say that FCRB for FI is equal to 250 is 800. Therefore, for this 800 and this 250, then I can say that this can resist a design bending compressive stress of FBD is equal to 206.8. That is how I can calculate, or even I can interpolate for the rolled steel sections with alpha LT is equal to 0.21, and for the welded sections with alpha T is equal to 0.49 using this table 13b also, because alpha T is equal to 0.1 for rolled steel section and alpha T is equal to 0.49 for welded section, right? Once we examine this, now let us see the next heading as the effective length of lateral torsional buckling for simply supported beams and girders of span length L0, where no lateral restraint to the compression flange is provided, but where each of the beam is restrained against torsion. The effective length LLT of the lateral buckling to be used in class 8.2.2.1 shall be taken as given in the table 15. Let us see the table 15, student, right? What is the table 15? However, now I'll examine that, right? However, in case of simply supported beams, let me see that table 15, right? This is the table 15, the effective length for simply supported beams, LLT, right? Now what is given is conditions of the restraints at support, right? One is torsional restraint and another is the warping restraint, and the loading conditions, the normal loading or the destabilizing, right? First one is a torsional restraint is fully restrained, or the warping restraint is both flanges fully restrained, right? Means if at all it is a welded plate girder section, then torsional restraint as well as the warping restraint. Now we'll see how we'll get the torsional restraint as well as warping restraint, right? And even it is connected by means of the main beam is also connected by means of the secondary beam. Then it neither subjected to torsion nor subjected to warping of such elements. Therefore, in such case for normal loading, the effective length of the simply supported beam shall be taken as 0.7 L, right? Whereas for destabilizing load conditions, the effective length shall be taken as 0.8 L. Like that, even you please see for other conditions, right? A torsional restraint, fully restrained, but warping restraint, compression flanges are fully restrained, not both, right? Then in which case, for normal loading 0.75 L, and for destabilizing load it is 0.9, right? A torsional restraint, fully restrained, but both flanges are fully restrained, in which case the for normal loading, it is 0.8, and for destabilizing this is 0.95, right? And like that you please see the other one is torsional restraint is fully restrained, but the compression flange partially restrained 0.85, and for destabilizing it is 1L, and similarly warping not restrained in both directions 1L only, right? Whereas for destabilizing this one is 1.2L, right? Like that you please see the other conditions. Once we examine this the effective length factors for the simply supported beams, now let us move to that of the other discussions, right? In case of the simply supported beams with intermediate or lateral restraints against lateral torsional buckling, the effective length for lateral torsional buckling to be used in class 8.2.1, 8221, LLT shall be taken as the length of the relevant segment between the lateral restraints. The effective length shall be equal to 1.2 times the length of the relevant segment in between the lateral restraints. However, the lateral restraint against the lateral rotation it supports in these beams may be provided by web or flange cleats 1, right? That is how we need to provide the lateral rotation at the support by providing the web or flange cleats. I will show that schematically. Bearing stiffeners acting in conjunction with the bearing of the beam or lateral end frames or external supports providing the lateral restraint to the compression flanges at the ends, and their being built into the walls. Then only we will say that restraints against the torsion rotation at the support is provided. However, for the beams which are provided with members giving effective lateral restraint to the compression flanges at intervals along the span, in addition to the end torsional restraints required in class 8.3.1, the effective length for lateral torsional buckling shall be taken as the distance center of the restraint members in the relevant segment under the normal loading condition, and 1.2 times the distance where the load is not acting on the beam at the shear and is acting towards the shear center, so as to have the destabilizing effect during the lateral torsional buckling deformations, right? And the third one, the cantilever beams of projecting length L, the effective length LLT shall be to be used in class 8.2.21 shall be taken as in table 16. That will see now for different support conditions. What is that table 16, student? This is how this is table 16. Let me see, right? The effective length LLT for cantilever beams, right? Now restraint condition at support continues with lateral restraint to top flange, right? Here you please see that we are providing a beam. However, a beam is provided means a continuous with lateral restraint to the top flange. Here top flange cannot buckle now, right? Now even at the top there are the four conditions: one, free lateral restraint to the top flange; three, torsional restraint; fourth one is lateral and torsional restraint. How they can be achieved now let us see, right? This is how the first one is that free means, right, that is how the end is free, and which is just provided by means of say just nominal connection in the lateral direction, right? It is free, not a rigid, right? Nominal, right? Whereas the second one is lateral restraint to the top flange. Lateral restraint to the top flange means now it will be provided by means of a stiff restraint, right? Which is provided by means of sufficient number of bolts or by welding as appropriate, right? The second condition. Third one is the torsional restraint. You please see now these two beams are provided by means of a secondary beam, because of which they will not be subjected to torsional movements. Therefore, these main beams are what called are having torsional restraint, whereas the last one is lateral as well as torsional restraint, right? Now you can see that laterally they cannot, right, in this direction. Laterally they cannot displace, and as well as they cannot rotate due to torsion, right? Therefore they cannot rotate because of this provision of the beams in the lateral direction, right? And also by connection of these rigid connections by means of the bolts, right? Therefore these are the four conditions accordingly for four different conditions at the top. Now I have for continuous with lateral restraint at the top plane, then if free under normal loading condition 3L. If it is destabilizing 7.5. Second one, lateral restraint to the top flame, then 2.7L, destabilizing 7.5L. Third one, torsional restraint for normal loading it is 2.4L, for destabilizing it is 4.5L. The fourth one is lateral and torsional restraint. Normal is 2.1L, for destabilizing it is 3.5, 3.6L. The second one is continuous with partial torsional restraint. You please see that there is a partial torsional restraint only, right? Not a full. What you have seen in the previous case was full, right? For this case, for free it is 2L. For lateral restraint at top L is 1.8L. Torsional restraint 1.6L. Lateral and torsional restraint 1.4L for normal conditions. For normal loading conditions. The third one is continuous with lateral and torsional restraint, like I said. Even I am providing a web and a flange cleat. Then obviously it is a full torsional restraint to the main beam, and even in lateral direction it will not buckle, right? Therefore, for free it is 1L, and lateral restraint to the top 0.9L, torsional restraint 0.8L, and lateral and torsional restraint 0.7L, right? And the last one is restraint laterally, torsionally, and against rotation in plan. Means if it is totally welded, this I section is totally welded at the end, obviously this neither can rotate nor it can move laterally. Therefore in such case, 1 free 0.8L, 2 lateral restraint at the top flange 0.7L, 3 torsional restraint 0.6L, lateral and torsional restraint 0.5L only, right? That is how the effective lengths of the cantilever beams are discussed as per the codal specification, right? Once we see this for the cantilever beams also, student, now where the member is provided intermediate lateral supports to improve the lateral buckling strength. These restraints should have sufficient strength and stiffness to prevent lateral movement of the compression flange at that point, right now. And also the intermediate lateral restraints should be connected to the member as close to the compression flange as practicable, right? Such restraints should be closer to the shear center of the compression flange than to the shear center of the section, right? And also for the beams which are provided with the members giving effective lateral restraint at intervals along the span, the effective lateral restraint shall be capable of resisting a force of 2.5% of the maximum force in the compression plane taken as divided equally between the points at which the restraint member is provided. However, further, each restraint point should be capable of resisting 1% of the maximum force in the compression plane. In series of such beams, if you are providing series of such beams with solid webs which are connected together by the same system of restraint members, the sum of the restraining forces required shall be taken as 2.5% of the maximum plane force in one beam only. Please make it right. In the case of the series of latticed beams and girders or roof trusses which are connected together by the same system of restraint members, the sum of restraining forces required shall be taken as 2.5% of the maximum force in the compression plane plus 1.25% of this force for every member of series other than the first up to a maximum of total of 7.5%. Coming to the top, the purlins adequately restrained by sheeting need not be normally checked for restraining forces required by the rafters, roof trusses or portal frames that carry predominantly the roof loads provided there is bracing of adequate stiffness in plane of rafters or roof sheeting which is capable of acting as stressed skin diaphragms. Right? Now once we see these discussions on the design bending strength, let us also see the discussions on the shear of the beam strength. The factor design shear force V in a beam due to external actions shall satisfy V shall be less than or equal to Vd, where Vd is the design shear design strength, Vn divided by gamma m naught, where gamma m naught is the partial factor against the shear failure. The nominal shear strength of a cross section Vn may be governed by the plastic shear resistance or the strength of the web as governed by the shear buckling as per the class 8.4.2. However, the nominal plastic shear resistance under the pure shear is given by Vn is equal to Vp is equal to AV divided by root 3, where AV is equal to shear area and Fyw is equal to yield stress of the web, right now. Next, and the shear area will be calculated as given below for I sections and channel sections. About the major axis of bending, for hot rolled sections, it is H multiplied by TW, whereas for welded sections, it is the depth multiplied by this TW, depth multiplied by TW of the plate, right, for the welded sections, right? And the other specifications are about the minor axis of the bending, right, for hot rolled or welded sections. For both, right, it is equal to 2B multiplied by TF, right, multiplied by TF, where TF is the thickness of the flame, right, and B is the overall breadth of the tubular section or breadth of the I section flange, as appropriate. This is the width of this flange, and TF is the thickness of the flange, 2 times such value, right. Then next, the rectangular hollow sections of uniform thickness loaded parallel to depth H, AH divided by B plus H, whereas loaded parallel to the width B, then AB divided by B plus H. And whereas for the circular hollow tubes of uniform thickness, 2A divided by pi, whereas for plates and solid bars, it is equal to A. Right? These are the shear areas about the major and minor axis. Right? Now coming to the top, where these are the notation student. Right? Just now we already seen that H is the overall depth of the section, D is the clear depth of the web between the flanges, TF is the thickness of the flange, and TW is the thickness of the web. However, the fastener holes need not be accounted for the plastic design shears and calculations provided. AVN is greater than Fi divided by Fu multiplied by gamma M1 divided by gamma M0 multiplied by AV divided by 0.9. Just now also you have seen the previous code specification, right? I'll just skip off that one, right? And the next one is, if at all, the resistance to the shear buckling, right? The resistance to the shear buckling shall be verified as specified. Means if at all the web is buckling, if the web is buckling due to the shear, then obviously whether it will buckle or not, that we need to check. If the depth to thickness of the web is greater than 67 times epsilon for a web without stiffener, right? If it is greater than 67 times epsilon, then obviously we need to check whether a stiffener is required or not, right? And greater than 67 times epsilon multiplied by kV divided by 5.35 for web with stiffeners, right? Where kV is the shear buckling coefficient as defined in class 8.4.2.2, where epsilon is equal to sort of 250 divided by Fi, which is called the stress ratio factor. And even now the shear buckling design methods are specified. The nominal shear strength Vn of webs with and without intermediate stiffness as governed by the buckling may be evaluated using any one of the two methods. One simple post critical method, there Vn is equal to VCR, where VCR is equal to AB multiplied by tau B, where tau B is the shear stress corresponding to the web buckling, right? Where different formula are given when lambda W is equal to less than or equal to 0.8, tau B is equal to Fi W divided by root 3, and if it is greater than 0.8 and less than 1.2, then tau B is given by this formula, right? And if lambda W is greater than 1.2, a third set of formula is given. Please see this student, where lambda W is the non-dimensional web slenderness ratio for shear buckling stress, which is defined as square root of FIW divided by square root of 3 tau CR naught. Tau CR E, where tau CR is the elastic critical shear stress of the web given by kV pi square E divided by 12 1 minus mu square multiplied by d by tw whole square, right? and where mu is the Poisson's ratio and Kv is 5.35 when transverse stiffness are provided. R it is equal to 4 plus 5.35 divided by C divided by D by C by D whole square for C by D less than 1. R it is equal to 5.35 plus 4 divided by C by D whole square for if C by D is greater than 1, where C and D are the spacing of the transverse stiffness and depth of the web. However, if you are using tension field method for calculation of this, then the nominal shear resistance is now given by Vn is equal to Vtf, where Vtf is equal to Av tau b plus 0.9 Wd WTF multiplied by TW Fi sin pi. It should be less than or equal to V pi, where the notations are like this, where tau is the buckling strength obtained just now we have seen, and F is the yield stress of the tension field obtained given by this formula, square root of Fyw whole square minus 3 tau b square plus psi square minus psi, where psi is 1.5 tau b sin 2 pi, where pi is the inclination of the tension field as given by tan inverse d by c, and WTF is the width of the tension field given by this d cos pi plus c minus sc minus s1 sin pi, and Fiw is the yield stress of the web, and d is the depth of the web, c spacing of the stiffness, and tau b is the shear stress corresponding to the buckling of the web, and SC S1 are the anchorage lengths of the tension field along the compression and tension flanges respectively, and which is given by this formula. S is equal to 2 divided by sin pi multiplied by MFR divided by Fyw TW under root, which should be less than or equal to C, and MFR is the reduced plastic movement capacity of the respective flange plate, which is given by this formula of 0.25 Bf TF whole square FIF multiplied by 1 minus NF divided by BF TF FIF divided by gamma Mn, that whole square, right, where BF TF are the width and thickness of the relevant flanges, and YF is the yield stress of the flange, right? Like that, if at all a stiffened web panel is there, then you just go through these codal specifications. I will not just go through. These are required in the case of the girder designs, right? Welded plate girder designs, right? Generally, these are required. Stiffeners are required, as well as end bearings are checked for the end bearings are required, and intermediate bearings are checked for the intermediate bearings are required. I will not just go through this, right? That is how there we will be providing, right, the bearing stiffener at the end, right, and intermediate bearing stiffener like that, right? Therefore, I will not go through this. This will be discussed during the design of the welded plate girder sections. Right? Now let's see other codal specification. And design of the beams and plate girders with solid waves, right? Therefore, now minimum web thickness, right? Under the serviceability requirements, if the transverse stiffness are not provided, then d by tw should be less than or equal to 200 multiplied by epsilon. Web connected to the flanges along the both longitudinal edges. However, if d by tw less than 90 times epsilon, then web connected to the flanges along one longitudinal edge only. However, when only transverse stiffness are provided, means web connected to the flanges along both the longitudinal edges, then if C is greater than or equal to D and less than or equal to 3D, then d by t W should be less than or equal to 200 times epsilon, and C is less than D and greater than or equal to 0.7 D. C by T W is less than or equal to 200 epsilon W, and C, if C is less than D, d by tw should be less than or equal to 270 epsilon W, and when C is greater than 3D, the web shall be considered as unstiffened, right? And the transverse stiffness and vertical stiffness at one level only need to be provided according to this class 8.7.1.3, right? As given by these codal specifications. Right? Now just go through this side. I will not go through this now. A second longitudinal stiffness is also needed at the neutral axis if d by tw is less than or equal to 400 multiplied by epsilon naught, right? That is also required, right? And the compression flanges buckling requirement. Then in order to avoid the buckling of the compression flanges into the web thickness shall satisfy this criteria, that the transverse stiffeners are not provided when no transverse stiffness are provided, then d by tw shall be less than or equal to 345 epsilon f whole square. When transverse stiffnesses are provided, when c is greater than 1.5 d, then d by t should be less than or equal to 345 epsilon f whole square. And when c is less than 1.5 d, d by tw should be less than or equal to 345 epsilon f, where epsilon f is the yield stress ratio of the web given in the square root of 250 divided by fy, right? And coming to the top, the sectional properties and flanges, I think I will not go through this, just go through this side. And flange splices, and how the bolted riveted connection should be done and welded connection should be done. The code now says that a gap of at least 1 mm should be left between the flange, the ends of the fillet welds between the flange and web by 1 mm at least before welding, right? And the other specifications of the splices in the webs, you just go through students, right? How the splices in the web should be provided, and how the stiffener should be designed. I will not go through this. But in the stiffener design, what now I will say is that whether a stiffener need to be provided or not, I will check, right? That for the outstand of the web stiffener, unless the outer edges continuously stiffened, the outstand from the face of the web should not exceed 20 times T Q multiplied by epsilon. When the outstand of the web is in between 14 T G epsilon multiplied and 20 TG epsilon or TQ epsilon, then the stiffener design should be on the basis of a core section with the outstand of 14 TG epsilon, where TG or TQ is the thickness of the stiffener, right? And the stiff bearing length. The stiff bearing length of any element B is the length which cannot deform appreciably in bending. To determine B1, the dispersion load through the steel bearing element should be taken as 45 degrees through the solid material such as the bearing plate, bearing flange plates, etc. See the figure 15. That will see in the figure 15. Let me see the figure 15, student. Yes, like this, right? This is stiff bearing length, right? Therefore, at an inclination of 45 degree, the load will be transferred like this, right? Stiff bearing length, right? This we will see during the designs, right? And coming to the top, other specifications regarding the buckling resistance of the stiffeners, I will not go through that because I am not designing of the stiffeners, right? And what should the outstand of these stiffeners, and what should the minimum stiffeners, spacing and amount of inertia, right, etc. also given, right? And buckling check on intermediate transverse web stiffeners are also given, and load carrying capacity of the stiffeners for the stiffness is given for the web check, as well as for bearing stiffness is also given. You will just go through this, right? And the bearing check, right? The load carrying web stiffener should be sufficient, should be of sufficient size that bearing strength of the stiffener FPSD given by this AQ FI Q divided by 0.8 gamma m m0 should be greater than FV, where Fx is the external load or reaction, AQ is the area of the stiffener in contact with the flange, and FYQ is the yield stress of the stiffener. And design of the bearing stiffeners, how they need to be designed, you just see this class 8.7.1, and design of these diagonal stiffeners should be as per this next class, and that of the tension stiffeners is also discussed, right? I will not go through this. Torsional stiffeners, how they need to be designed, are also discussed, right? Now coming to the top, how the connections to the flanges in tension zone, and how the purlins, hollow sections, for the hollow sections, and for horizontal stiffness, these codal specifications are also given, student, right? And the purlins and sheeting rails, girts, and bending in non-principal plane, right? These codal specifications are also given, and finally for the codal specifications are also available for the box girdle section that you already seen, right? box girdle sections also, right? So these are the different codal specifications. But we already seen this when member is subjected to combined forces, right? This we already seen combined shear and bending, right? This formula for plastic means if V is greater than 0.6 VD, then M is equal to MdV. For plastic or compact section, MdV is equal to MD minus beta multiplied by MD minus MFD should be less than or equal to 1.2 ZE Fi divided by gamma m naught. That we already seen where beta is equal to 2B divided by VD minus 1 whole square. This we also already seen. For semi-compact section, MdV is equal to ZE Fi divided by gamma m naught. Similarly, it was subject to combined axial force and bending moment. Then for section strength, for plastic and compact sections, then you use this formula. You use this formula. Just let me see this formula. Right? Fi divided by Mn dy whole to the power alpha 1 Mz divided by Mn dz whole to the power alpha 2 should be less than or equal to 1. Conservatively, it can be written like this also: N divided by Nd plus Fi divided by Fdy plus Mz divided by Mdz should be less than or equal to 1, where M by Mz are the factor applied moments about the minor and major axis, and Mn dy and Mn dz are the designed reduced flexural strength under the combined axial force corresponding to this uniaxial bending acting alone as per the class 9.3.1.2, and it is the factor applied axial force, either tension or compression. If tension T, compression P, right? And it is the design strength in tension TD as per the class 6R in compression as per the due to the yielding given by Nd is equal to Ag Fi divided by gamma m naught, and Mdy Mdz are the design strength under the corresponding moment acting alone. Ag is the gross area of the section, and alpha and alpha 2 are the constants as given in the table 17. Let us see that table 17 student, right? These are the constants alpha 1 and alpha 2 for different sections, I section and channel section. Alpha 1 phi n greater than or equal to 1, and alpha 2 is equal to 2, like that. For circular tubes, for rectangular tubes and solid rectangles, right? These values are given, right? And if at all these sections are subjected to for plastic and compact sections without bolt holes, then the following approximations may be made for evaluating Mn dy and Mn dz. For plates, Mn d is equal to Md 1 minus L square for welded I and Z sections. Mn dy is equal to Mdy 1 minus N minus A divided by 1 minus A whole square should be less than or equal to Mdy, where N should be greater than or equal to A. Mn dz is equal to M dz multiplied by 1 minus N divided by 1 minus 0.5 A less than or equal to M dz, where N is N by Nd and A is small a is equal to A minus 2 Bt F divided by A should be less than or equal to 0.5. For standard I or H sections, for N less than or equal to 0.2 Mn dy is equal to Mdy. For N greater than 0.2 Mn dy is equal to 1.5 Md multiplied by 1 minus N multiplied by N plus 0.6. Mn dz is equal to 1.11 Mdz multiplied by 1 minus N should be less than or equal to Mdz. For rectangular hollow sections and welded box girdle section, when the section is symmetric about both axes without bolt holes, Mn dy is equal to Mdy multiplied by 1 minus N divided by 1 minus 0.5. Alpha F should be less than or equal to Mdy. Mn dz is equal to Mdz multiplied by 1 minus N divided by 1 minus 0.5. Alpha W should be less than or equal to Mdz, where alpha W is equal to A minus 2 BTF divided by A should be less than or equal to 0.5. Alpha F is equal to A minus 2H TW divided by A should be less than or equal to pi T. For circular hollow tubes without bolt holes, Mn is equal to 1.04 Md multiplied by 1 minus N to the power 1.7 should be less than or equal to Md. Whereas for compact sections, in the absence of high shear force, right, then Fx, combined axial force and bending Fx shall satisfy the following Fx should be less than or equal to Fi divided by gamma m naught,
or the cross section without holes, the above criteria reduces to A divided by AD plus M by divided by MDY plus MZ divided by MDZ should be less than or equal to 1. This is what called the combined formula, right? And about the overall member strength for bending and axial tension, M effective is equal to M minus psi T ZEC divided by A should be less than or equal to MD, should be less than or equal to MD. And coming to this, where psi is equal to 0.8 if T and M can vary independently or otherwise it is equal to 1. And bending and axial compression, if both are there, then it should be given by this formula, iteration formula, P divided by PDY plus KY multiplied by CM by MY divided by MDY plus KLT MZ divided by MDZ should be less than or equal to 1. P divided by PDZ is plus 0.6 KY CM by MY divided by MDY plus KZ CMZ MZ divided by MDZ should be less than or equal to 1, where CM by CMZ are the equivalent uniform movement factors as per the table 18. P is equal to applied axial compression under the factor load M by MZ, maximum factor applied bending moment about Y and Z axis respectively, and PDZ design strength under axial compression as governed by the buckling about the minor and major axis respectively, and MDY and MDZ. The design bending strength about the minor and major axis respectively, where Ky is equal to 1 plus alpha Y minus 0.2 Ny, it should be less than or equal to 1 plus 0.8 Ny, Kz should be taken as 1 plus 1 lambda z minus 0.2 multiplied by nz should be less than or equal to 1 plus 0.8 nz, and KLT is equal to 1 plus 0.1 lambda LT ny divided by CM LT minus 0.25 should be greater than or equal to 1 minus 0.1 ny divided by CM lambda CM LT minus 0.25, where ny and nz are the ratio of the actual applied axial force to the design axial strength, and CM LT is the equivalent uniform movement factor for the lateral torsional buckling as per the table 18, right? As per the table 18. This table 18 now showing student equivalent movement, equivalent uniform movement factor for bending moment. If at all the bending moment diagram is like this, varying from M to psi M, then the range where psi is plus greater than or equal to 1 and less than or equal to minus 1. Greater than or equal to minus 1 and less than or equal to 1. Then for uniform loading, CM by CMZ, CMLT should be for uniform loading as well as concentrated loading. For both, these should be taken as 0.6 plus 0.4 psi. It should be greater than or equal to 0.4. Like that, you will see for other bending moment diagrams, right? For other bending moment diagrams, varying from MN to psi Mn at the other end with change in curvature, where this alpha 3 is equal to ms divided by mh, right? Then for the different ranges, right? With alpha is greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 1, and psi greater than or equal to minus 1 and less than or equal to 0.5. For uniform loading, right? This CM by CMZ and CMLT should be taken as 0.2 plus 0.8 multiplied by alpha S. However, it should be greater than or equal to 0.4. Likewise, you will see for concentrated loads and other loading conditions also. I will not go through the other conditions right now. That is how the table 18, right now. That is how all the different discussions on the laterally supported and laterally unsupported beams, right? This is all just we have seen, right? MD for laterally unsupported beams, MD is equal to beta B multiplied by BD ZB, right? All these discussions we have seen elaborately. I think where this beta, in this formula of MCR where IT is the torsion constant given by this summation of beta I Ti cubed by 3 for open section, it is given by 4 A squared divided by summation of beta by T for hollow sections, and where IW is the warping constant given by 1 minus beta F multiplied by beta F I by H by whole square for I sections, for I sections, and it should be taken as 0 for angle, T and narrow rectangular sections, where beta f is equal to the moment of inertia of the flange is compression flange of the section divided by the moment of inertia of the entire section of the two flanges, right? Compression flange as well as the tension flange, both, right? That is of the different discussion student, right? Let me also see the schematics, right? I think we almost covered all the topics of the theory, right? This is how this check for the web buckling we'll see in the next class with the numeric problem, right? Which is disposed at an inclination of 45 degrees as per the codal specification, right? This check for web buckling we'll see in the next class with the codal specification. This is what the web buckling at the concentrated load and at the support reaction, right? Yes, student, right? I think we have covered almost all the topics, right? Now we'll try to conclude the session, right? If you have really enjoyed the discussions what we had in today's class, don't forget to click like, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll meet in the next class with design of laterally supported beams, a few solved problems. Till then, bye bye students.